Pretty spiritual.
Hi, I'm Shay.
And I'm Amy.
Welcome back to another episode of
Pretty Spiritual.
Hi, Hun.
Hey, hun. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you.
Good.
So, we know the drill by now.
We do.
What has been your high vibe and low vibe of the past week?
So, high vibe, low vibe. So, my low vibe is I am not feeling 100%. I am a busy girly and I still haven't had my blood test done and I'm waiting for that. And all my hormone levels all feel a bit chaotic and just a bit, I am tired. I'm one tired girly.
I feel for you, hun.
Thank you, hun. I'm struggling. And then my high vibe is that I have plants that are starting to flower in my garden and I have lots of new dahlias coming, which means that I'm starting to get in my head the vision of what my garden's going to look like this year, which makes me so happy.
Oh, you've waited a long time for this,
Yes,
I feel.
I have. I literally wait all year for it. But no, I'm so looking forward to getting out there and just starting to kind of like put some more plants in, and I've got like a better vision than I did last year. I feel like last year I just went crazy and yeah, I started growing stuff in my windowsill already and things were already kind of coming up, little baby shoots. So I'm really excited. It makes me a positive girly.
Oh, I'm very happy for you. And I can't wait to see the garden this year.
Lots of videos and pictures incoming.
Good.
So what about you? High vibe, low vibe?
So my high vibe is that I have just come back from a lovely holiday. It was really, really nice. It was a really nice break. I was doing a bit of work whilst I was there, but it was still nice just to have a change of scenery, have some sunshine, have a little bit of relaxation. I read some of my new book, which was lovely. And it was just a very much needed change of scenery.
It looked lovely, and you got to see some planets.
I did. I actually did. It was lovely. You can always see the planets from there. It was just beautiful. Really, really nice. So yeah, that was my high vibe. And then my low vibe has got to be probably that I've had the holiday blues a little bit actually this week. So it's been like first week back after holiday, and I think you always just feel a little bit sluggish, don't you? It takes a little while to get back into your normal routine and just feeling good. So yeah, I've just felt a little bit sluggish and a little bit holiday blues, but that's to be expected.
To be expected until the next one.
Definitely, which won't be too long.
Not too long.
You know me.
So this week we are talking about grief on a spiritual path.
And I feel like it's really important to talk about this because we talk a lot in spirituality about growth and about healing and about learning, but we don't always talk about grieving and the impact that can have on us. And I think when we talk about grief, it's not just about the loss of losing somebody. I think it can be grieving past relationships, past versions of ourselves, friendships, relationships that haven't worked out. I feel like there's lots of different forms of grief, and I think it's really important that we talk about that.
Yeah, so grief is something that everyone will or has already experienced in some form or other, and it looks completely different for all different types of people, whether, like you said, it's the loss of someone, loss of a situation, a relationship, changes, things like that. So let's dive into it. So, what does grief mean to you?
So grief to me is the way that you feel after you have lost something. I suppose it's the process that you go through when, you've lost something. And that, it can be that you've lost somebody, but like we mentioned, it can be the process that you go through when you realise that you've lost like a previous version of yourself, or you've outgrown or lost a friendship. I think it's the way that we feel in the process that we go through after that loss. And I think it's actually a really important part of the process as well. I think it's something that can't be rushed through, and I think it's something that although other people can be around us to support us, I think it's a very personal journey for us, like as an individual. And I think it's something that, not that we have to like deal with alone, but something that we have to process in our own way.
Yes, I completely agree. I think for me, I haven't had as much grief as, say, others in my life have experienced. And also seeing how people close to me have dealt with grief and it not fitting the stereotype of how you think grief should be is really interesting. But also, I mean, let's talk about losing someone through death. For example, I hadn't up until this point lost anybody close to me. And then I did lose someone, and we used to be close, and it's a family member. And I remember being told the news by another family member, and I felt instant grief for that. And then I felt guilty about grief because I was like, okay, we weren't close and we didn't speak, but then there were still memories that I was grieving. But then I also felt the grief for other family members that were really, really impacted by this loss as well. And that was a huge thing for me to realize, that grief isn't just you must earn it, like you must have earned it by being close to this person. And you hear people like, oh, you don't deserve to grieve this. I mean, not that anyone said that to me, but you do hear of that being said, or people having the feeling like they don't deserve to grieve someone. And I think it's a complete personal journey for people, and it's okay to feel grief for something that you're not necessarily close to. I mean, the grief that I felt when this situation had happened, when this person had died, it was very confusing for me, because it was unexpected. And then there was conversations like, well, they're at peace, etc., which is very conflicting to tell yourself, like, try to turn it into a positive, and you don't know what to say to people, you don't know how to articulate it. And I did find myself saying, well, at least, like, I was saying the same thing and putting a positive spin on it. It was just all a bit strange. And
I think you've hit the nail on the head there with, like, I think it's a really complex like web of emotions, isn't it? It's not straightforward. And I think in that example that you've just given, you're somebody that you were once close to that you weren't close to at the time that they passed, has died. And like you said, I think that can bring up so many different other emotions as part of it as well. So a lot of the time we're not just processing the grief of the loss. Sometimes it's like it can bring up memories from the past. It could, there's just lots of different things that come up when we're in that situation of grief. And I know from other people that I'm close to who have lost people that maybe they've not had a relationship with at the time that they've died, but they did once have a relationship with them. I think sometimes part of the grief is that you're grieving the loss of what wasn't as well. For example, if you've lost, a parent or a sibling or somebody that you had this idea of how your relationship with that person was going to be, but the reality was that your relationship wasn't that, but then they pass away. It can be so complicated because you're not just grieving the loss, you're almost, you might
processing.
You're processing the loss of, like, the whole relationship that you'd hoped would be there, that kind of never was and almost never will be as well. And I think that's really sad and that's really complicated for people.
Definitely.
So,
and I completely get that. My experience of grief, although limited, this particular situation ended up triggering an OCD response in me. And then that coincided with when I had my big episode of whatever, so it created like a chain reaction almost, because it was really interesting. And then that in turn triggered my spiritual journey. So I didn't expect it to impact me in a way that it did, but it had a massive impact. But then that's about a person. Another experience of grief that I have is I thought I was okay after I had my hysterectomy. And this is a potential future that I'm grieving now. And I know why I had the hysterectomy. It was to save my life. It was because of health issues. And I was like, okay, I'm fine. I didn't particularly want any other children anyway. And I obviously had problems when my son was born. He has disabilities and whatnot. And I was like, I don't want to potentially go through that again, because unfortunately what he's diagnosed with, they don't know if it can happen again. So I'd probably be dealing with the anxiety of that happening again if I was pregnant. So I kind of made the decision, like, I just didn't want to have another child. But when I had my hysterectomy, I was so sure up until the point I literally had it done. Like, I wasn't even contemplating it when I was going for the surgery. It was only afterwards I was like, as a woman, and like, I don't mean this like I believe this, but as a woman, our bodies are designed to do that. And I know some people struggle with doing that.
Yeah.
And I was grieving having the choice taken away from me.
Of course.
So even though I said I didn't want to have children, I was grieving with the fact that I could always say no, or I could change my mind and say yes. And I know everybody's kind of fertility journeys look different, and it's not easy for some people. I mean, technically it wasn't easy for me, but it happened by accident. But yeah, I really struggled with having the choice to say no taken away from me.
Of course, because it's then outside of your control, and it feels, I imagine it's very final, isn't it? It's kind of like in the same way as when we've talked about losing a person, you know, this is something that's very personal to you, that then it's kind of it's a permanent decision that then affects your life. So I can completely, you know, understand how that must have felt.
Definitely. And I was never the kind of person, like, if a baby went past me, I would never be the person that's like, oh, can I hold the baby at all? Like, I just wasn't interested. Or I'd see a baby and be like, oh, look at that baby. And it was only afterwards I was like, oh gosh, this is impacting me. Like, oh, I'm crying inside because I've seen a baby. But interestingly, I, through energy work, knew I always had sacral blockages. And sacral's to do with, like, your creativity, your passion, your fire. And I always knew I had blockages there. And whenever I had my energy healing sessions, that's where my blockages were. The minute I ripped my womb out,
Ripped.
yeah, let's say ripped, I was all clear in that element. So back to the spirituality side, it was so funny that something like that could be a symbolism, because I had problems in that area. That's why I had to have the hysterectomy. But it's amazing to see how that translated, like me unblocking my sacral chakra. After I ripped it out.
But it's understandable, isn't it? Because, you know, we've got these energy centers in our body, and I think when there are things that are going on in the physical body, it absolutely manifests energetically as well.
What's really interesting was, before I knew that the problem was worsened back, I was having energy healing, and our healer didn't know I'd previously had issues there. And she picked up on something, and I said, oh yeah, I told her what had happened. I'd had to have things removed, blah, blah, blah. And she said, I think you need to go get that checked again. And I went and got it checked, and then it was like, oh, it's back, it's worse. We need to remove things. So it's really interesting how energy kind of transferred into my healing sessions at that point as well.
Definitely. And I think this goes back to what we've talked about many times, that energy healing can be such a powerful experience, but also a powerful tool, because it can give us lots of indications of other things that are going on in the physical body. So that's amazing. So I want to pick up on something that you said earlier. So you were talking about how, in the example of when you lost somebody, you kind of try and put a positive spin on it in the moment, and sort of try and tell ourselves that you know, they're in a better place now and things like that. And I think this is something that is like human nature to do. And I think that grief is one of those situations where people really struggle. And I mean, us as human beings, we really struggle to hold space for others and not try and like jump in and offer like comfort. You know, I think in these situations people try and comfort us and we try and comfort ourselves, which is understandable. It's human nature. But I think sometimes when we do that, it's like we're trying to rush ourselves through, like we're trying to be like, this thing's happened and I feel like this, but on the positive spin,
we're trying to put a safety measures in place so we don't feel into that.
Yeah,
grief, can't we?
Yeah, it's almost that. And I'm not criticizing you for doing that, because I've done the same, and I think everyone can probably relate. And I think, you know, when time has passed, a lot of the time we can reflect and we genuinely can see this, I don't want to call it the silver line, but maybe like the more positive side of things. But in the moment, I think it can be really really, really difficult. And like, I always remember when my great nan died, and she was 95. And you know, when I told people would obviously be like, I'm really sorry to hear, you know, they'd give kind of the sympathy and the empathy. And then it would be like, oh, but you know, she's had a really good life, a really good innings.
Yeah, like 95 is such a great age.
And I know, and that they mean so well. They don't mean anything bad. But in that situation, that doesn't give me any comfort in my loss. No. Like, it really doesn't. I'm glad that I had her in my life for such a long time. And I, you know, I'm grateful and blessed. And I know that so many people don't get to 95. So I totally wholeheartedly recognise that. But that doesn't help me.
Those words were not helping you whatsoever.
No, they don't help me. They don't make the weight of grief feel any less.
I personally don't think anything anyone can say to you can make the weight of grief feel any less, to be quite honest, because I remember having a conversation with my family member saying, there is nothing I can say that right now, like, I don't actually know what to say. And we'd enter into conversation, and then they'd be doing the positive thing, like, well, and I'm like, yeah, well, and then there is actually nothing anybody can say. I think grief is such a personal journey, and it's something that you move through on your own. And even say if you've got two people that are impacted by the same grief, both those people will deal with it completely differently. They'll be at different stages of grief in a different way. And again, obviously we're talking about people, it's different for situations. But when you strip it back, I think grief is such a personal solo journey in a way. That's not to say you can't have support from others around you, but dealing with it and moving, let's not say past it, but moving forward with grief is a personal journey.
I think so, completely. Like you said, you know, people deal with it differently, and even if people have experienced the loss of the same person, the way that they kind of process that and deal with that will be very unique to them. And I agree, you know, I think it's important to like have that support network, but I think that something that like you've just literally said it there when you were like saying to somebody, I don't know what to say, I know that there's nothing I can say right now. I actually think sometimes that is the best thing to say. Sometimes you just say that, you know, that is all you need to say is I don't know what to say right now, and you know, I know that there's nothing I can say, but I'm here for you. Like, I think that's really all that people need in that moment. And you know, it's not for anyone else to try and kind of bring somebody out of that grief, because they need to go through that process in their own time and in their own way. And I think that we kind of, like you say, you don't, I don't think you get over grief. I think you learn to live sort of alongside it. Yeah. And there are days where you feel okay and fine, and then there will be days where like it will sometimes just hit you. And I know that from people that are close to me, and that have lost people that are close to them, that there might be weeks or months, and then all of a sudden like they'll almost have this dip where they're really thinking about that person. I think it's like a journey, isn't it? And that journey, I think, almost goes along with you kind of for the rest of your life, really. I think it kind of shapes part of your whole human experience, like going forward.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, mentioning no names, I know of people when I'm like, grief has not even touched the sides with you. Like, you are just one steam train heading through to the next station.
Yeah.
And even a couple of years on, I look at this specific person, I'm like, you're a machine. Like, completely unfazed, and it's not like they're harboring these emotions and not dealing with them. Just business as usual, able to process it, on we go. And it's like crazy to me because I'm such a emotional person, and I'm like, if that had happened to me, it would be a different story. And I think it's just recognizing that people deal with things completely differently.
They do, and I think it's just respecting that, isn't it? And just kind of letting people deal with things in their own way, and kind of being there for them in any way that you can.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, it's such a complex thing.
So we've just talked about obviously losing someone. What would you say grief looks like beyond losing a person? So like a situation. I mean, I've said about like the hysterectomy, obviously, just as well.
Yeah.
And that's almost like grieving a potential future, grieving a choice.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think a big part of grief can sometimes be grieving past relationships.
Yeah.
And grieving what you maybe thought was going to be that then wasn't, if that makes sense. I have had relationships in the past. I had a relationship when I was in my early 20s, and I was with this person for quite some time, and I suppose at the time you think about what your future is going to look like potentially with this person. You like romanticize it. You have a plan, you think ahead, and you think how things are gonna turn out. And I think when they don't, and when you go through a breakup, particularly with somebody that you've been with for quite a long time, yes, you're processing kind of the breakup that's happened there and then, but again, you're also processing, like, you're grieving what you thought was going to happen in the future, that then hasn't. And I sometimes don't think we give ourselves enough sort of like recognition, or what's the word that I'm looking for?
Allowance?
Like, we don't always allow ourselves to kind of feel that. And again, like, when you think back to certain situations in your life, let's say you've gone for a breakup, like I'm talking about when you're younger, your friends are like, oh, it's fine, like, we'll go out, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
we'll get you, like, you'll be snapped up, you'll be and again, I suppose it's like those unhelpful comments in a way. And again, people do it with like all of the right intentions. And I've said things like this as well to friends in the past, so I'm not judging. But I think, again, like, somebody goes through a breakup,
they've just had their whole life upheaved.
And especially, if you're with somebody, for example, that you've lived with, or even somebody, that you've like married, if you're going through a divorce, or you've had children with somebody, if you've got a really, like, you've sort of had significant life milestones with somebody, and you then kind of break up from that, That is a level of grief as well. So yeah, so you have experienced that.
Do you know what I grieved? I grieved living on the same street as my friends.
Yeah. You missed me.
I missed you. I did, because that was such a big part of my life. Of having my friends on my doorstep and being able to do things with people. Like, it was quite frequent, wasn't it? And taking myself out of that situation, I was grieving like almost this community of like friendship and life that I built around me. I mean, I also grieve all the decorating and effort I put into that house, but, you know. Anyway, grieving my time.
Sad times.
But obviously that was the best decision for me at the time, and life changes and life's great. But yeah, like I had this sense of feeling lost because I wasn't around my friends anymore. Like, we were literally all in like a circle of houses.
We were.
Almost. Yeah. So, and I know people have moved on since then, but I'm talking at that time, it was really hard for me because then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then when you were allowed like 3 people in the garden, I was like, all my friends are in each other's gardens. And I'm not in that bubble. And that was grief for me, because I was back home at my mum's house at 25 and I was like,
yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like your community, isn't it? It's like your community of people that were around you because of a relationship breakdown. It's like it was a ripple effect, and I think that actually is a really good point as well. Sometimes when you go through, in this example, a breakup with somebody, it's not just that person that you're stepping away from. Like in your example, it was that you were stepping away from the area that you lived in, and like we obviously still, still friends and stuff. But it was almost like a big change, wasn't it? And I've had it in the past where, with relationship breakups, I feel like you might have mutual friends, but a lot of the time, your friends kind of divided. It's quite unique. Don't get me wrong, I do have some friends that I'm friends with them, and I've got ex-partners that are friends with them too. Like, we have mutual friends, but I think that's few and far between. And sometimes you grieve that as well, because you think like, oh, I've got genuine friendships, or I genuinely really liked their family, or and it's not just, it's very rarely just one person. It's normally like a ripple effect, and I think that kind of adds to the feeling of loss. And again, I think it's like can be really complex, and it's a process that we have to go through in our own time and in our own way. And I think you can still know that something is kind of the best for you, and you know it's the right decision for you, and you're not sort of regretting your decision or regretting the direction, but that doesn't mean that you don't feel the loss, and it doesn't mean that you're not entitled to grieve that situation. And I also think that something particularly with relationships that, again, I used to hear this a lot when I was younger, but like when people would be like, oh, you're not over that yet, or are you not over that person? Like this thing of like getting over somebody.
It has to have a time frame.
Yeah, and it's almost like it happens when it happens. Like there's not a set time. It just, again, it's very gradual. It's not like you wake up one day and you're like, oh, suddenly I'm completely over it. Like sometimes people do get that, and that's great. But, I think it's a lot more complicated than that.
I mean, that's definitely my partner. If he wakes up the next day, he's all good to go. And I'm like,
oh, bless him. That's his way of coping, isn't it?
But me, I think there is no time scale. And I think allow yourself that time to give into your grief is a big thing, because you may not like how it feels, you may not like what it's taking from you, and you may not like kind of everything that's going on. But if you avoid it, I can sometimes think that can cause more issues for you and prolong it. I think if you actually give into the grief and really kind of address, like, it's there, and it's present. Hello, grief.
And we've talked about before, haven't we, on other episodes, about how if you don't process what you're feeling now, it will just harbour away, and then 5 years, 10 years down the line, it will just randomly come up, and you'll be like, why do I suddenly have all these not all these feelings, but like all these emotions
Yeah.
that are coming up that I now need to deal with. I thought I was over this, but if you don't deal with it properly, it will just keep coming up time
Yeah,
and time
like, why
again.
is this impacting me? I think a very interesting version of this from experience as well, for me, is a relationship you never had. So we're talking like parent dynamics here. And it took me a very long time to process that I didn't have my dad in my life. He was like in and out, and it wasn't the relationship that you would expect to have with a father-daughter relationship. And I did grieve that, and that used to trigger like some crazy behavior in me, crazy emotions, like not good. And but I kept putting myself back in that situation because I wasn't processing the situation. And it was only when I finally dealt with it and was like, this is the situation, this is why, it's not your fault, you can't change it, and blah blah blah, is when I stopped having those reactions.
Yeah.
When things cropped up, or I'd had a bottle of wine and started feeling emotional, because and I'm now in a position where I can actually not have that person in my life, but that person can drop in and it not have an impact. And that is the power of dealing with the grief and loss of something like that.
Yeah, for sure. You've kind of taken your control back in terms of the power that you're giving away to that person. But that's so hard. That's so hard.
I can't actually think what I did to make that happen. I didn't intentionally. And it had haunted me for years and years and years. And don't get me wrong, there probably will be a point where I have a bad reaction at some point because something's triggered me. But I'm at a stage now where it's been a couple of years and it doesn't impact me. To be honest, I think everything is going back to when I became a mother. It really shifted things for me, but also embracing spirituality. Those two obviously coincide with each other. That me learning how to process that has been a big thing. It wasn't like I sat down with a pen and paper and was like, right, we're getting over this. This is no longer going to take my power away, and I'm not going to be an emotional wreck. It was a gradual thing, and there was no time frame. And at one point, I actually remember thinking to myself, is this ever going to stop triggering me and creating these responses? And everybody would know when I'd been in contact with that specific person because of how I was acting. And to be honest, there was a recent contact, and my partner had messaged my sister like, oh no, she's in contact with this person. And I had like my sister trying to ring me, trying to get me off the phone and everything. And it's like, because they were so worried about what kind of effect that was going to have. But I spoke to like my mum the next day, and she was like, wow. And I just knew that I'd dealt with it, like in a way that it no longer impacts me. And the strength was there.
Yeah. And that's amazing to be able to get to that place. And I suppose just wanting to normalize that some people might never get to that place as well. And I think it's amazing that you have. But I think that, I think going back to what we've said about it being personal to everybody, some people will maybe always live with an element of
being triggered by
of being triggered by certain things, or, from being affected by that grief as well.
Definitely. And it doesn't mean that the grief isn't there. It is that the grief's not away in a cupboard somewhere and I don't. It is still there, and I could still probably sit and talk about it and get upset about it. But the response in what I used to have is better, and I feel much more forward in the grief journey of it. More accepting of the situation than I was. Instead of grieving what I had in my head as what I wanted and what it should be.
And that's really powerful as well.
But yeah, it's not a one size fits all, I think, is the main point.
Definitely.
So do you feel like there is pressure to find the meaning in grief?
Yeah, I think there can be. And I think this is quite common, when it comes to spirituality and possibly to other religions as well. Like, part of my spiritual belief system, and probably other people's as well, is that, you know, when somebody crosses over, they are still with us in spirit, and that there's always that connection. And sometimes I think because of that, there's this expectation that you don't go through the same level of grief, maybe, because it's almost like, but they're still still with you.
The spirit's with you.
You know, and it's like, yes, I do find some comfort from that, absolutely. But in the moment when you've lost someone, or when you're going through something,
not helpful.
It's not really helpful, if I'm honest. It doesn't, and also I think we're still here having our human experience, and we should be allowed to process those emotions. You know, we're not just meant to bypass that grief. And there's that famous saying that was said by maybe the Queen at one point, and it was like, I think it was the Queen, but I might be quoting wrong, which says that grief is the price that you pay for love. And I think that that's so true. And I think it was the Queen that said that. I might be completely wrong.
Let's amazing if you've remembered that.
I know. I don't know if it was the Queen. But yeah, so, you know, it is so true. But yeah, I think when it comes to processing it or feeling like we have to find meaning, sometimes you can't find meaning in it, and sometimes maybe there is no meaning. And if you can find meaning in it and that brings you comfort, then that's amazing. But if you can't, and you just, you know, feel like, I don't know why this happened, and you can't find any meaning in it, I think that's perfectly okay as well.
Interestingly, like when you said about like people saying, well, they're with you in spirit, what they don't realize when they're saying that is, say like we're talking a very close relation or a partner or anything. So when you lose that person, okay, yes, they can be with you in spirit, but what you're also losing is conversation. You're losing their touch. You're losing their scent. You're losing everything in that way that was present about them.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, it's not helpful, because losing those senses and experiences that you were having is a huge loss, and that in itself is separate to grieving like the person, because it has an impact on your life.
Exactly.
Massively. You've lost something that was so present. And
definitely. Yeah, I agree. Just because you believe that they're still with you and that they've gone to a better place, it doesn't negate the emotions that you feel because of the loss.
And let's say that you are able to communicate with people after they pass on. Okay, I know not everybody believes that, but let's say you are able to do that. In some situations, it's not like you can actually have a conversation with that person. And from experience, you don't get that person there.
Yeah.
It's not like the person's right in front of you and having that conversation with you, and oh, it's okay, they're here, but in spirit I've still got this person. It isn't like that, and I think people have a misconception of that.
Yeah, I agree completely. So yeah, I think everyone is entitled to feel grief and to process it in the way that is best for them. So we've talked quite a lot about the heaviness of grief. What things actually help when you are grieving?
So for me, I am one of those people that by default goes into the positives in my head and starts to think of all the good times. So when I lost my cat Rocket, when I lost my cat Rocket, which, funny story, you know, when your house was being built, he was stuck under this house before.
Was he?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
I had to call the builders out because he got stuck under this house as the foundations were being laid.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Sorry. ADHD is in full swing today. He came back, by the way.
That's not how he died. Just to clarify, my house was not built on top of your cat. I feel like we just need to get that out there.
No, he had many more years after that. He died when I had my son because he didn't like him. But no, he didn't. Bless him. Rest in peace, Rocket. So when I lost my cat, it hit me so hard because he was my soul cat. He was everything to me. I got him when I was 17 years old, living on my own. I got him and his sister, and they grew up with me. And I still have a sister, but I was beside myself. I had days off work. It was not okay. And no, but like my partner doesn't really like cats either. He's from an anti-cat household, but he obviously now lives with me who has cats. So he couldn't understand really because he'd not really had a pet that he'd lost. And so I found it really difficult to speak to anyone about it. And obviously I had like the usual, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, what a baby. I'm so, yeah, I hope you're okay. But for me, I did go to the positive part, and I actually went back to what that cat had given me. And I sat there and after crying for days, and I was like, I am so thankful I had this experience and realised I'd had this support system. I have not cried about anything during this conversation. I'm welling up over the cat. Like, Jesus Christ, I am not okay. Anyway, yeah. And I sat there, and when I was able to think what he had given me, how much he had supported me, and what we had gone through and how I'd grown up with him, that gave me so much immense peace. It didn't change the pain I was feeling and the loss and how sad I was. And I think being able to see what that relationship had given me was such a big thing for me to process that and able to move on from it. And obviously in the UK, you're expected just to kind of go back to work, crack on, go back into normality, and that's what I did. But yeah, I mean, it took me a good few years to get another cat because I didn't want to feel like I replaced him. I still have his sister now, and now we have Louis, and I didn't feel the urge to replace him. I was very, very much like, okay, I have Lola, I have Jax, my dog, and Rocket gave me this and I miss him. And every time I walk past his picture in my house, I'm like, I miss him so much. And like, there's still that grieving element. But being able to look at the good times, stereotypically, but also the growth.
Yeah.
I feel like I just rambled on a lot there, but
no. You didn't. I think that was all really helpful, and thank you for sharing that. Like, and I think, you know, it's the time aspect, isn't it? I think
it was time.
It is just time, and it sounds, you know, so cliche because people are like, oh, things do get easier in time, but I think that is true when it comes to grief. Not necessarily that it comes easier, but I think you learn sort of to you learn to live with it, and maybe the weight of it isn't so heavy on, you know, certain days. But you know, I think a huge thing that helps when you're ready to is to talk about it to other people, you know, to talk about what you're feeling, you know, how you felt, and then to, like you talked about, reflecting back on memories, but you know, if whether it's a pet or a person or a relationship, like being able to just talk about that thing, that person, that pet, I think really, really helps. And, you know, being around people that just kind of hold space and listen.
In the situation with my son and everything that happened with him, and there's certain elements that I grieve from being a new mom and not being able to do certain things that new moms do. And I know that we've spoke openly about that, and that's something that did take me time to say, like, okay, this has impacted me because I haven't been able to do X, Y, Z. Like, I never got the baby bubble. Huge thing that people get. They're like, oh, enjoy the baby bubble. I never got that. So that was a huge one for me with regards to my son. And then being able to kind of like feed your child in a normal way, things like that. And it took me a long time to talk about that, because when I spoke about it, it triggered something in me that made me feel like a failure, if that makes sense. But you're right. Being in a place when I'm ready to actually be able to talk about how I'm feeling and why that makes me feel, and have someone hold space, and obviously hear their kind of, I mean, no one was going to tell me I'm a terrible mom because couldn't feed my child long. But yeah, having someone hold space and listen to that and see how you were actually feeling when you were in the midst of that kind of traumatic loss. But yeah.
I think that you've hit the nail on the head. I think that really, really helps. And I think in those situations, I think we mentioned earlier, there's very rarely anything that anyone can say that can change it or make it better. But I actually think we're both similar in this way. Part of the way that we process emotions is by talking. It's like verbalizing what's going on in your head and how you're feeling, and the other person is just listening and holding space, and they're not saying anything, but by you talking you're helping yourself to make sense of it. And I think we're both quite similar in that way. And I think that's something that can help. So I think even with the grieving, it's and being around other people, sometimes it's not so much about them or what they can say, it's actually about you
saying it out loud.
Saying it out loud and helping yourself to make sense of it.
I think not being restricted on what you say is such a big thing in the spiritual journey as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Being able to stand in your power and talk about things, how they get that off your chest, not feel restricted is such a huge thing.
Definitely. And I think as well, when you're with other people naturally, and you're talking about things, you can be in a situation where you're like crying and processing a lot of emotions, but then someone might like say or do something, or you'll remember something, and then you'll be kind of laughing and it will bring you out of that, and like it doesn't change what's happened, but it just brings a little bit of like lightness to the situation, and I think that can be really beneficial as well.
It's like a release, isn't it? When you harbour things that you're not able to say or like get out, or you don't feel heard, that causes energy blockages, and you in the long run, it's not great. So if you are in a space where you are able to speak to people, even if you're not looking for them to give you a resolution to fix your grief, like you said, just talking about it, getting it out there is such a healing thing to do. And like you said, and then it could turn into laughter. It could turn, if you're in a conversation and you're talking about these kind of things and you're not expecting a result, just talking about it sometimes is enough to help.
Definitely.
So, Hun, if someone listening is going through grief right now, what would you say for them to take from this episode?
I would want them to take that grief is a deeply personal process. It's very, very complex, and it's not something that you can or should try to rush through. You can get through it, and you will get through it, but that will happen in your own time. So I feel like the best thing that you can do is be kind to yourself, allow yourself to process the emotions that are coming up for you, speak to people that are around you when you feel like you're able to, even if that's just for your benefit, for you to be able to make sense of what's going on in your head. And don't restrict yourself with any kind of timelines of when you need to have come out of your grieving phase by, it will happen in your own time. And just kind of go with that process. I think the other thing that I would just say as well is when you talk about being on this like personal healing journey and then you hit a period of grief, it feels like it knocks you back.
Yeah, like it's a step back in your journey, like, oh no, all my hard work.
Yeah, and that's not the case at all. I feel like the two things, like although they're kind of interconnected, they're not. Like if you're experiencing grief, it doesn't mean that you're not healing. It doesn't mean that you're not learning, growing or progressing. It's something that's very normal, and you need to allow yourself to process it. And I think the other thing that I would say is if you need more specialist support, like if you feel like you need a support network, you don't have people around you that you can talk to, then I would definitely reach out to grief groups, grief charities. You know, I'm sure there's lots of resources online. I'm sure that if we can have a look and add some things into our into our show notes as well. Just, you know, make sure that you reach out and get the help that you need.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Pretty Spiritual.
If you've enjoyed hanging out with us, then don't forget to like, subscribe and follow along on our platforms to be the first to receive any updates.
And we will see you next Tuesday, the 26th of May, for another episode of
Pretty Spiritual.
Pretty Spiritual.